What's up guys, it's Mabo here. Today I want to show you my favorite lenses shooting portraits. There are 3 lenses from 24mm to 35mm over 50mm. Each of these focal lengths has its advantages or disadvantages, depends on what you want to express. So for instance, the 24mm works great if you want to catch the surroundings, including your model, and you don't want to cut out too much of the environment. And on the other way, do you need really intense motion blur? Do you want to put the focus on the model, on the face? Then the 50mm might be the better choice. My favorite 24mm lens is the Canon FD 24mm SSC. It's a vintage lens from the 70s. I really like when lenses are not that clinically sharp. These vintage lenses have really nice color rendering, give the whole look a softer touch. Since I'm going for a more vintage vibe, a more filmic vibe, these Canon FD lenses are a really good match. I think 24mm is really the sweet spot if you don't want to cut out too much of the environment, but it's not too wide to distort the model's face too much when getting close. And you can even get great bokeh with the lenses like the 24mm 1.4 G Master from Sony. So if you gotta shoot where your model should blend in with the environment, 24mm might be the best choice. The challenge with these vintage lenses is that you have manual focus only, but if you get used to it, I really like the look and I really like having the full control over focus all the time in my videos, and you can be really artistic. If you want to know how to focus manually, check out the video here. So straight up to the 35mm, which is on my Sony a7S III right now. The 35mm 1.8 here from Sony is totally light, really sharp, autofocus works great. This really tiny lens is so practical and produces some great images. With 1.8 you got a great bokeh when getting closer. If you want to go even creamier at 35mm, you should go for the 35mm 1.4 G Master. I think 35mm is great if you want to put focus on your subject. You cut out some of the surroundings, you have to move more back to get the environment in, but it's still pretty easy. It's not cutting out too much. With 35mm lenses it's already easier to get a better bokeh than with 24mm lenses, and this 35mm in between 24 and 50 is a good all-rounder. So to the 50mm, in this case I got the Canon FD 50mm 1.4 SSC, also the vintage lens from the FD line out of the 70s. Similar color rendering like the 24mm. With the 50mm you get a really creamy bokeh. With the 1.4 it's really dreamy, but I actually found myself not using the 50mm too often. It's cutting out a lot of the environment. In winter with the Lady I got these wide angle shots, but I really had to move back like 20-30 meters to get her in frame in a wide angle shot. It's more work with the 50mm, but it's also possible. But in some shooting locations you don't got the flexibility that you can walk back 20 or 30 meters. You're really limited and you're stuck shooting with a close distance, and you're cutting out a lot of the environment. As you might know, shooting a different focal length gives you a different result. It's said that the 50mm focal length is producing an image that's closest to the human eye, so it feels natural. You can see it on faces. Faces seem a little wider than on the 24mm. The 24mm already slims the face a little bit up, and the 50mm really reproduces the natural forms of a face and keeps it realistic. If I would have to split it up, how much I'm using these 3 lenses, I would say I'm shooting with the 24mm actually 50% of my shootings. Then with the 35mm it's about 40%, and I'm rarely using the 50mm. I really want to get back to using the 50mm, but I felt like in many cases where I want to shoot and get the environment in, it really cuts out a lot and I have to walk back like a mile to get the environment back in. So it's really limiting you. The 24mm is so versatile when you want to get wide angle shots, also when you want to apply movement. Especially movement with 50mm lenses is more difficult. Getting closer and bigger with your focal length, shakes get more visible. As my shooting style is really flexible, I experiment a lot with movement, and I'm shooting mostly handheld. The 24mm really lets you experiment. Shakes are not so visible and you can get really creative with framing while moving. If you want to know how I create the look in my videos, you can check out this video here. Also check me out on Instagram. I'm posting some reels and short tutorials over there. And don't forget to check out my clothing brand Visual Minds, clothing for creatives. See you in the next one. Peace.